think there's still a huge misconception that to be a great leader, you have to be the first one in, the last one out, boots on the ground, willing to do anything anybody else has done. While there is some truth to that kind of comes with the territory, it's not all true. If you're doing everything, then you're not doing the most important things as a high-level executive, CEO, or founder of your company. That's why we're here. We're here to talk about, what does it take? Does it take, just walking the straight and narrow and following the regular playbook to success? Or do you have to get out of line to be successful? Well, my guests are those that choose not the straight and narrow, but to go against it. If you're doing every single job in the building, you haven't built a business. You've really just created a high stress situation for yourself. Out of line is for people who realize that freedom comes from building a system that's bigger than they are. And you know what that takes? Humility. My guest today is Cary Daniel, the CEO and co-founder of NEXTAFF. Cary is an entrepreneur and an M&A expert who's led and scaled 3 different companies and has made it to the Inc. 500 list multiple times. He didn't get there just by trying to be a superhero and taking everything on. He got there by being a brilliant strategist who knew exactly what hats he needed to take off in order to focus on the big picture. So we're talking to him about his unique franchise model and the real strategy behind scaling what I believe is an absolute empire. Here's my conversation with Cary Daniel. Let's get to it. Why don't you just give us, just a little overview of your story and who you are? And I want you to brag a little bit, because if you don't mention the accolades, I definitely will. I'm just so impressed by your background. I'm starting in the staffing in 1995. You were only in it for a few years and then branched out on your own. How did you get into staffing? Was that a lifelong dream of yours? Because it wasn't for me, that's for sure.
No, I think my story probably follows along with the majority of people in this industry. I always joke that I was coerced into getting into this industry. So my lifelong business partner and co-founder, James, we had worked together in financial services. He went into staffing. And at the time in the mid-90s, it was booming. He was working for a publicly traded company. They had just gone public. And he said, man, you ought to see the opportunity going on over here. You ought to come check out this company. And so I went over there and I was looking for something in sales. And I remember this was a day labor company back in the 90s.
Okay.
And I remember walking in my suit and tie and my little portfolio and walk into this concrete floor, people sitting in plastic chairs.
Yep.
The guy interviews me with a dip of skull in his mouth. And I'm like, what in the world? Where am I? This is so bizarre.
Yeah.
And so I had the interview and I called my buddy James back and I said, no, I have no interest in doing this.
Right.
And he just said, you should see all the people getting promoted. Everybody's making great money. And I said, well, okay, I'll think about it. And so I called him back and then they let me know, well, we don't have a sales position, but at the time day labor, you don't really have recruiters necessarily, but they call them CSRs. So reluctantly, I agree, fine, I'll start as a CSR. And they go, okay, well, we use Gallup to pre-screen all of our people. And so you just got to take this Gallup test and then you're good to go. So I take the Gallup test, I get a call back and they said, you failed the Gallup test, but they want you to take the manager test.
Interesting. Okay.
So I took the manager test, I passed, and they hired me with the idea that, hey, we'll start you at the bottom, work your way up. And that's what happened. Went in CSR, doing those day labor, getting there at 5:30 every morning. And 6 months went into sales, 6 months went into management. Probably 6 months after that, went and opened another location for them, came back to run my original location. And, so it was probably 1997. This is all happening in 2 years.
Yeah.
And, I'm 27 years old and running, probably one of the top 20 offices out of 400 across the country and making more money than I'd ever made. I was so excited and it was jacked up. But, you're in the day labor world. And those of us that have lived that world, you have 300 people a day standing at a counter that, are not the nicest people in the world to
Yeah.
work with.
Right.
And I'll never forget, we used to have a more of a, I called them professional, but they were really a light industrial weekly pay, a
Okay.
staffing agency
Right.
right down the street from us.
Okay.
And I was out prospecting one day and I pulled in there and I said, "Hey, do you have a stack of your business cards? We get guys that walk in all the time. They have like suit and tie on. They want to come drop off their resume." And I'm like, No, you're in the wrong spot, dude. You need to." I said, "I'm always sending people to you. If you just give me a stack of your cards, I'll start handing them out." And I'll never forget, on my way out, she said, "Hey, you ever think about leaving labor ready?" And I said, "Every morning at 4:30. So she called me and said, "Hey, we're looking for a district manager in training
Oh.
at our company." So I went and met with her, and it was a fairly small company at the time. I think it was the day after I was hired, they announced that they had just sold to SOS Staffing in the roll-up. And I'm like, "Okay, is this good or bad?" They're publicly traded.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was good or bad. I was just gonna do my thing, and within probably 6 months, the 3 people that were above me were all gone. So
Yeah.
I've already opened up multiple offices. I've run successful offices. In my mind, I knew everything there was to know about staffing, so I'm gonna start my
Yeah.
own, call my old buddy James back, and in 1998, we ventured out on our own, and in a very short order realized we didn't know what we didn't know.
There's still learning, right?
Well, you don't realize at the time, yes, you're in the office and you're doing the sales and you're doing the recruiting, but
Mhm.
there's this whole back office engine. So when we
Right.
started our first company and the first client wants a certificate of insurance and I'm like, we don't know anything about
What
that.
is that? Right.
We spent probably 2 years just bumping our head against the wall. And this is way before Chat GPT
Oh
and
my
even
gosh.
Google. You couldn't just go, you know, say, "Hey, Chat GPT, draft me a client services agreement." This is
Yeah.
all done on the fly. So it was quite the experience.
I don't envy that. It's been, I'm starting my own business now, and I say every day, I don't know what I would have done without ChatGPT telling me, because you're right. There's so much on the other side that is a surprise. I have so much respect for the literal grunt work that you had to put in to build. And literally, you had to write every word of what type of staffing did you start?
Once I moved from day labor into weekly pay, even though it was light industrial,
Okay.
it was such a world of difference.
Hmm.
And the clientele, the people you were placing, the volume, the busyness of the office. And so we did light industrial weekly pay, and just it was one of those where you kind of fall into a niche. And one of the first clients we got was a hotel, and that client led us to another hotel, which led to another hotel. And pretty soon, in a couple of years, we were like the hospitality niche in our market. And purely by accident how we got into that niche.
Is James still with you? What's his current role?
Yep, James is the COO. He's operations, everything operations, and then I'm the CEO.
That's great. Let's rewind again, because most startups fail. I don't know what the statistics were then, but now it's like 90% and still such a competitive market. What do you think that you did differently than other companies?
I think part of it was the vision that we had for the company. I'm always amazed uh, of people that start a business, and you can kind of tell when they start where their mindset is. For example,
Mm,
if in the beginning we called it Daniel Staffing,
mm,
my mindset obviously is fairly narrow. Or Kansas City Staffing, I have
right.
a very narrow niche of what I think I'm capable of.
Yeah.
And so our first company, the name of the company was Human Resource.
Okay.
And we thought that's a big name, it's a familiar word, and it's a pattern interrupt when I'm doing cold calls and I say, "Hey, this is Cary with Human Resource. I was wondering if I," and they're like, "Wait, who? What?
That's sharp.
Human Resources? What are
Yeah.
they?" That's all we were looking for, was something that sounded bigger than we were,
Yeah.
and some pattern interrupt. And so I think, one, starting out, the fact that we were talking big from the beginning. We wanted to go into 50 markets and we wanted to do all these things. And you recruit a certain type of individual when you can cast a vision and talk like that versus, "Hey, I own Daniel Staffing. Do you want to come be my number two
Right.
employee at a little tiny company?"
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just not a lot of vision behind that. And so we were able to attract some really talented folks in the beginning, good people that were better than us, smarter than us. And we opened up, and I would never advise this to anybody, but we opened up 10 locations in 18 months as a startup. It was the dumbest business move ever, but we did it.
Wow. In
And then
18 months.
it was crazy.
So that totally threw me off. We went from 3 to 41 locations, and we tried to do 6 in a year, and it was a failure. And this was when we were established and had plenty of capital to put behind it. How did you do it? Did you open, or did you attempt to open? First, was it successful?
We opened 10. I would say probably in year 2 is when we started to see some of the diminishing returns. And what we started to see was office number 1 gets off the ground and we got the right people in place. We got everything good momentum. Then office number 2 goes, then office number 3 goes. And over the course of time, what we started to see was then office number 1 starts drifting down. And pretty soon, if I'm just pulling a number, say we were doing $7 million across the company. If office number 1 was doing 4, well, in year 2, maybe office number 1 was doing 3 and office number
Right.
2 was doing 2. And so we started to see this diminishing return. And probably by year 3, we looked at a couple of the smaller ones and thought, do we really need this smaller office? Then yeah, we started to constrict
Mm.
pretty quickly after that.
How did you decide where you were going to go with those 10?
It was, history in Kansas City, history in the market of where we had seen other offices succeed.
Okay.
And then when we went to St. Louis, we had 2 gentlemen that opened Springfield and St. Louis with us, and they knew those areas. And then Denver was we just drove out there and we just drove around looking for places. And Denver was a complete just dart on a dartboard,
Wow.
so.
Your story is just reminding me of of our founders, because they did something similar. They didn't open that many offices in one year. We were in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and then one office in Virginia. Just one of those whims, that they were. I think we could be successful here. We got the right person, which I heard you say that you hired people smarter than you. Cary, that is all you needed to say for me to know why you're successful, because you probably use your ego in a positive way, not a negative way to pound your chest and I'm the best. But hiring people smarter than you, I think, is a huge, or not doing that is a huge failure for so many startups. Tell me how you came up with that understanding and that humility, especially at such a young age and in so early on in your business ownership.
I wish I could give you a really good, classy answer for that. That would be a nice soundbite.
Right.
Honestly, for me, it probably was just of not wanting to do certain things. So for
Actually
example,
like that. Yeah.
and that's an honest answer. I don't want to know how the technology works. I don't want to know how to, program, make sure the computer matches up with the server. And I have no desire to know any of that stuff. It frustrates me and it bores me and I don't
Hmm.
like it. I enjoyed sales. I enjoyed, coaching and building up people. Let me focus on that. Everything kind of revolves around your ATS in operations.
Right. Right.
I don't have a login to our ATS. I never have.
Yeah. You shouldn't.
I would do more damage than good if I were in there. If I need a report, there's plenty of people that can get a report for me, but there's no reason for me to be in there fumbling around, that kind of thing. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why James and I have worked so well together
Mm,
over, coming up on, it'll be 30 years now,
wow.
is because we both overlap where James is much stronger than operations, but I'm adept at it and I can do things in it when needed. And James is the same way on, vision and leadership and,
Right.
thinking about things outside the box. And so we complement each other, but we
Yeah.
don't stack on each other. And
Yeah.
sometimes you see that in a business where you have either 2 people that are wanting to run everything
Yeah.
or 2 people that are operational, 2 people on the break, you never get out of the parking lot. So you need a
Yeah.
little bit of that balance so that everything operates efficiently and nobody does anything too drastic.
Yeah, I can't
We're
imagine
good at
some
that.
if you didn't have that, some major decisions if you're on opposite ends, or if you're both feeling really strongly. Have you guys ever had battles over something that you were both passionate about and on opposite ends?
I'd say in 30 years, I cannot recall one time ever
Wow.
having a knocked out drag out. We
Wow.
we just don't operate that way. You know, if we have an issue we're working through, I'll state my case, he'll state his case. And usually by the end of it, we make a decision and then we both agree on that and
Hmm.
move on. But
Is that something that you can give advice about, or is it just that you have the relationship and that's the dynamic and it just works that way? Or what advice could you give?
I don't know how much is it, how much is our personalities just fit into those pegs appropriately versus us knowing each other's strengths, each other's
Mm,
weaknesses, and being clear about our lanes.
yeah.
And then also not being afraid to, say, hey, by the way. And I would say James probably does more of a checkup on me than I do him because I'm more, shoot, ready, aim. I'll just jump in and tackle it because it pops up and I go, oh, and and he's like, hey, let's make sure that operations does that or whatever. So, but it doesn't bother me or offend me or I don't get all bent
Well,
out of shape. It's like, no, you're right. It's confusing if messages are crossing over.
think you've outlasted most marriages. That's like that's a huge congratulations, and you guys have been successful. So you have this brand new model that you guys started for a franchise, correct?
Correct.
This is very interesting because I think in the staffing world, there's still a lot of old school mentality of we have to do things the way we always did it. You guys seem to do the opposite. And especially this franchise example, can you walk us through how that came up?
What happened was during COVID, obviously the world went haywire. Franchising pretty much stalled out. It was interesting to see the number of inquiries that we started getting asking about remote. Do I have
Yeah.
to have brick and mortar? Do I
Yeah.
have to do this? And coming out of COVID, it was like, yeah, that's the way the model is. That's the way that works. And fast forward to 23, 24. It's the old story of the granddaughter that goes to Thanksgiving and asks the mom why they cut the ends off the ham. And she goes, you heard that story?
Think so, but tell it because I vaguely remember.
Yeah, I guess, so the granddaughter goes to Thanksgiving dinner and noticed that the ends of the ham were cut off. And so she asks her mom, Mom, why do you cut the ends off the ham? And she goes, well, that's the way grandma always did it. And so she goes to ask her grandmother, why do you cut the ends off the ham? And she said, well, that's the way my mother did it. And so she goes to ask the great grandmother. She goes, great grandmother, why do you guys cut the ends off the ham? She goes, well, back in my day, the stove was only this wide, so we had to cut them off. I don't know why your mom and your grandmother do it. It's just
Yeah.
they do it because it's always been done that way. And
Right.
in 2024, in our annual offsite, I
Mhm.
said, okay, I want to challenge you guys on something. Why do we have to have brick and mortar for franchise?
Mm.
Well, I mean, you're this, and then we start giving all the reasons why. And I said, but is that true? Do you have to have it? I said, because think about this. I said, if you think about the biggest objections we get of taking, let's say out of 150 leads we get, one becomes a franchise. Half of those people never return a call, right? Of the other 75, let's say we talk to, half of those we disqualify, not the right background, not the right fit.
Mhm.
They don't have sales experience. They don't have the right money. And then
Mhm.
the other, half DQ us for a
Uh-huh.
variety of reasons. But normally, one of the two reasons why one of the parties DQs the other was, I don't want brick and mortar. I don't want to sign a lease. I
Mhm.
don't want to hire full-time people.
Yeah.
I don't have a background in sales. I don't have the enough startup capital. Probably those four reasons are why 90% of the people either DQ us or we DQ them. And I said, if we went to a virtual model, you eliminate every single one of those objections.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. However, if we're going to go virtual, we've got to make sure our technology is up to date and capable of doing that.
Mhm.
And then if we're going to open up the franchise model to non-sales background people, we have to have the orders for them to work on because that,
Right.
with staffing, that was always the driver. If you don't have B2B sales experience,
That's interesting.
that's a
Yeah.
DQ. Sorry, you just you're not gonna you're not gonna
Mhm. Mhm.
do well. So that's what we did. And in 2025, we rolled that out,
Wow.
really focused on the VMS MSP business in healthcare. We
Okay.
wanted to start it in healthcare because we knew that that would be more adapt to the virtual model initially. And we also already had some VMS and MSP relationships. And, fast forward to the end of 2025, I think the last time I looked, we were sitting around 5,000 open job orders through those.
Wow.
So now we're able to offer, instead of just all the salespeople, we could offer to top recruiters that
Yeah.
say, I'm doing this for somebody else, or I'd love to go out on my own, but I'm not gonna get on the VMS
Right.
I can't afford the insurance to do that. I don't have any of the qualifications to do that. Now we have that system set up.
So you share all the job orders with your
Yes.
entire company?
Oh, that was the other thing, territories.
Yeah.
Well, how are we gonna do this if we did it I said, "We'll just get rid of them."
See mouths dropping when you said
And I
that.
said,
Sure.
"You know what?" I said, "If we open it up nationwide and they can recruit nationally, they can fill orders from all over." I said, "Why would they need a territory? They can go all over the world." It's no different than when we started in 1998 and you don't know what you don't know. Now that we've rolled this out, now you start seeing some of the complexities that come along with it.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, what happens if I sell the order, or I live in Texas, but the order's based in Virginia, and this office out in California fills the order, but I have to service it? We're like, oh man, okay, we got to
Right.
figure out the split arrangements and all that stuff, but that's
Wow.
the
So
detail.
that's pretty fascinating. And yeah, I can imagine the what ifs are endless with that. But I think it sounds like there's more positives than negatives. That's exciting. Are there any startup costs for that at all?
If you're working out of your home, you probably already
Mhm.
have a computer, you have internet access,
Right.
you have all that stuff. So now your startup costs are going to be legal formation of your business,
Yeah.
and what do you want to start spending on your recruiting budget?
Yeah.
And then we will have a franchise fee, and that is probably that is the bulk of
Okay.
the startup cost. But
Gotcha.
we're looking at, as we roll forward, looking at making that more affordable, whether that's through a finance mechanism or
Interesting.
something like that.
And this is just you one day coming in and going, why are we doing this way?
Yeah,
Is that,
really from the market feedback,
yeah.
you know, just hearing it over and over and the requests that came in, and taking that feedback and questioning why. Why do we have to have brick and mortar?
Right. I want to switch gears a little bit because I want to talk a little bit more about you have a foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how it started, and how do we get involved?
Yeah, so we set up the Be Legendary Foundation probably this is going on 7 years ago, and it's morphed a little bit now. It's actually part of the KU Endowment Fund. So it's like think about it like a sub chapter of the KU Endowment Fund.
Hmm.
But that's where it's at today. It started where back in 2018, a youngest son, Landon, passed away in a car accident, and he was going into a senior year of high school, and his goal was to go to Kansas University, and he wanted to go into the journalism school, but he wanted to be a broadcaster. That was his
Okay.
goal. In high school, he would broadcast the football games, the basketball games. He was on the daily news thing. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to attend that school. And I think his ultimate goal was to be, on ESPN someday, would have been kind of his dream job because he loved
Yeah.
sports, but he had the personality that he could, you know, talk on camera as well.
Mm,
And so when he passed away, friends and family, they circle around you and they want to know how they can support you.
yeah.
And at the time, we didn't really have an idea. And so we thought, if people want to do something, we'll set up a GoFundMe. And at the time, we thought, Landon was really big into sports camps, basketball camps. Uh, we had talked about the broadcasting camp that KU had. And we thought, you know what? Maybe this would be a good use of those funds
Mm,
if we raise money to help less fortunate kids be able to attend some kind of camp. And so that's how it originally started. Um, we were connected with somebody at the KU endowment, and they said, all that heavy lifting you guys are doing, we could do all that for you. We'll manage it.
that's
We'll take
great.
all the applications. We'll do all that stuff. And so now people can still donate to the endowment care of the Landon Daniel portion of it.
Yeah.
And then every year when KU puts on their broadcasting camp for high school kids, they offer scholarships in Landon's name.
That's amazing. I'm so sorry for I can't imagine and everything that you went through continuing to just try to support others is amazing. I have two boys who are getting into that age, so it's really touching to hear what you went through, and I'm so sorry that you did, but I think that, if you turn tragedy into something inspiring, it certainly can help a lot of people. So thank you for sharing that. And how can we get involved, Cary?
So it's a little complicated because
Okay,
if you, I'm going to try and look it up while I can right now,
sure.
but it's actually, I think it's KU Endowment, help kids, that can't afford a broadcasting camp to have that opportunity to get in there and, they do everything you could imagine at a broadcasting camp, from sitting behind the desk and doing all the other stuff. So
That sounds like a lot of fun. That sounds like the kind of camp I would have liked too as a
yeah,
kid. Cool. So tell me, you have so many awards. How many Inc. 500s do you have? 7? Inc. 500, Inc. 5000?
man, you're putting me on the spot here.
I told you to brag.
That may be correct.
So you have what I have is you have 7. You also have an award in Ernst and Young Entrepreneur of the Year
Final,
list. Okay,
yeah.
that's
Don't give me too much on
okay.
that.
You've also been a lot involved with M&A, acquiring and selling. You've kind of done a little bit of everything. Acquisitions are near and dear to my heart. I've had good ones, I've had bad ones. Tell me about your experience with that, and was there something that you learned throughout that process? Because I feel like that's one that you don't know until you know, until you go through it, and every single one is different. So tell us a little bit about your experiences with the M&A side of things.
From a global standpoint, looking back through all the transactions I've been involved in, I'm trying to think of the stuff that I say all the time when we're doing something. One of the first ones would be a deal is not done until that money is in your account.
Absolutely.
We have had deals fall apart at closing, the day of signing,
Mhm.
just stuff that we've had handshake deals that
Right.
never went anywhere. It's just like, and I have an inner conflict here because I'm one of these people that I believe in manifesting. I believe in
Yeah.
visualization. I believe in the power of positive thought. But at the same time, it's like, on a handshake deal, do I go ring the bell and I start celebrating when I know it's not done yet?
Right.
So I have a little internal struggle there sometimes with
I can imagine.
when I feel like a deal's done, we come to terms, and still sitting there kinda clenched up of,
Right.
"Well, it's not quite done yet."
Right, right, right.
But I wanna push through that. I wanna say, "Yes, we did a handshake. It's happening," and keep that positive,
Yeah.
energy going. I'd say the second biggest lesson so far is probably just be cautious of even if you're the smartest person in the room and you've been doing it 50 years and the company you acquired has been doing it 2 years, to come in day 1 and just start slashing and wiping stuff off and changing this, and we're doing this, that disruption, it just freaks people out. And know you wanna get in there and make changes immediately, and I know you wanna save money and cut costs and do all this stuff. I would just be cautious
Yeah.
about, how much you do across the board on
Yeah.
that first day. It causes major disruption.
Did you learn that because you knew that, you kind of figured that, or did you learn that by going through it?
Most of it's come from trial and error, doing it one way and realizing
What's the worst acquisition or toughest, let's say, acquisition that you made?
I have to think on that one because nothing jumps out. I mean, now, uh, there's been some where we did it and you know, years down the road, you find things out,
Right.
like, for example, keeping the original owner as part of the management team, and then finding out 4 years later that after certain meetings, he would gather some of the people outside and say, "I had no idea that was going on. What are you talking about?" And so
Say
learning
that
about
that is happening more times than not when the, owner stays on. They have a hard time letting go.
So you hear a lot about acquisitions, and we get
Yeah.
involved in acquisitions where they're like, we really want the owners to stay. We really want the owners to continue on. One of the books I read on M&A talking about roll-ups and everything else,
Mm,
that's one of the worst things you can do is to keep an owner on a bigger strategy. Now, if you're acquiring a company and it's going to be standalone and everything else, then it may make sense to keep that person there and operating, et cetera. But the stats prove out that it usually does more harm than good.
it does.
And
Yeah.
the existing folks have a hard time buying into the new leadership if the old leaders,
Right.
you know, it's like sitting around in a room and you're talking about this and they all look over to see what they're thinking. Are they nodding their head? Are they shaking their
Yeah.
head? We're going to follow that because
Yeah.
we've been doing that for 10 years. So
Yeah.
that's one I'll pay close attention to.
I was the acquisition implementer And those are some of the most fascinating stories that I have in my career is working with them. And then the first one we did, nobody visited any of the locations. There was only 3. And we walked in and somebody's desk was being held up by boxes and books and that they had to bring in from their home. Some of it is pretty hysterical. You do speaking engagements as well.
I do. That's
Yeah.
something that's kind of on the real back burner. I enjoy it, and I'd like to do more of it as
Yeah.
my time frees up.
What are the topics that you like to speak on?
I have a couple, they all center around kind of a similar theme, and a lot of it is about whether it's about goal setting,
Mm,
whether it's about manifesting your desires,
yeah.
whether it's about overcoming adversity. It really kind of circles back into the mindset
Yeah.
and how your mind can work for you, but also how your mind works against you in that, that voice that
Yes.
chirps at you, the monkey mind.
Right.
And
Right.
so much of it is about how you can control that or manipulate it to your advantage. And so it's interesting because a lot of the different talks, if I talk to somebody, we really want something, revolving around goal setting. The topic will be about goal setting, but a lot of times it comes back to that same thing is getting your mind right.
Really
And
does.
how do I, how do I move forward if I'm stuck? And I have another one that, really gets into the mindset for folks that have been through a tragedy
Mm,
and have been through an experience where they are just overwhelmed with grief, anger, or, any of that lower emotional vibration. And they can't figure out a way to get out of that
yeah.
loop.
When I did training in my old company, we did a lot of those discussions. It would just always naturally come up. Because you're in a production based business and you've got to cut out the BS, right? Like you have to just get to the goal. You got to figure out where people's strengths are and how to get them to the end zone, right? And I remember an employee asking me, we're talking about mindset, and he goes, "Yeah, I get it. I hear that all the time. Yeah, good mindset, get positive mindset. How?" He said, "I'm a super negative person. I don't think positively. I think everything sucks and doom and gloom all the time." What would you tell him, Carrie?
When you have somebody that says, I just can't, you know, I can't get out of my way. And you start talking about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, and you say a growth mindset, it's all
Yeah,
words. But if you can show them, okay, a fixed mindset believes these things, and that's going to reinforce this. A growth mindset believes these things.
right.
In my opinion, it's just so much more beneficial for
Yeah,
somebody like me that I can look at it and comprehend what you're talking about instead of listening to you talk for 45 minutes ago. That was a really good speech. And I walk out of it. And the
yeah.
other thing I try and get on all mine is a lot of mine, I try and make them into more of a workshop. I want you to
Mm,
walk out of that room
with
not
something.
going, wow, that guy was really good. I got to see if I can find something out about that later. I want you to walk out of there going, I left here better than when I came in
Yeah,
here.
giving them something to implement. I think that's so powerful. So when we do part 2, Carrie, I'm gonna have to get you on the whiteboard
Yeah.
and you have to give us a visual, and that'll be a good starting point for your book because you have to be writing a book if you haven't already. You have so much success. How have you been able to manage both worlds? And maybe you do call that work life balance, or maybe you don't. I don't know. And obviously, you've been through so much in your life on both sides. How do you bring those together and still be well balanced enough to continue running a successful business, have a positive attitude, and um still run a good personal side of things too.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on the work-life balance. I think that's probably
Mm.
overused quite a bit. I've never really come up with my own phrase for it of what it is or how
Work
I
life blending is what I call it. You can use
that
that if you
that
like it.
that sounds a little more appropriate.
Yeah.
So I would say, especially in the early years. So I'm dialing back to when, you've got 2 kids and they're in
Mm,
every sport you can imagine and all the
yeah.
school plays and band and everything else going on. I think in my mind, and maybe this is just the entrepreneur side of me, I never viewed myself as a Well, yeah, I work from 8 in the morning till 6 at night, and then family times from
Right.
6 to 9, and then I never viewed it as this regimen program. And so in my mind, just like an entrepreneur, if I have to work 20 hours tomorrow, I have to work 20 hours tomorrow. But just like family, if I have to go to a family event, I have to go to a family event. And so I think I was really good. And probably, if somebody said, wow, you guys just celebrated your 20th anniversary, you guys have been entrepreneurs for 25 years, what would you say out of that 25 years? What's your proudest accomplishment? I would probably say the fact that I do not think I ever missed a single practice,
Wow.
game, play, recital, band concert,
Wow.
never missed any of that
It's
stuff. I
huge.
did all that. I mean, I coached both kids' baseball teams, and they both played football and soccer and basketball and lacrosse, and
Yeah.
it just was nonstop. But it wouldn't be unusual that if my son played golf in high school, and golf tournaments don't happen at 6 o'clock at night.
Right.
You're okay. The golf tournament starts at 1 o'clock. Fine. I'm going to go in the office. I'll work from 6 to noon, and I'll go watch him golf from 1 to 4, and then
Hmm.
after that, then I'll come home, I'll work, and if I gotta work later that night, that's fine too, but I
Yeah.
I I got it all in, and I think not, spending a lot of your time doing kind of worthless things. If you think about how many hours in a day, how much productivity you can squeeze out of, if I need 7 hours sleep. I don't need 8, 6, I'm a little tired, but 7 hours is perfect for me. Now,
Yeah.
that's a lot of time when you think about it in a day.
Hmm.
And if I'm not constricted to got to get my work done between 8 and 5,
Right.
well, I think just as long as you're not restricted by a clock or something like that, you can do it all.
So, would you say you love what you do for a living?
I'd say I love what I do as a general statement. Of course, you don't like everything you do every single day.
Fair.
Just completed a transaction this week, and that involved
Congratulations.
new this, new that, new banking relationship,
Yeah.
and that just causes so much disruption. And yesterday was one of
Yeah.
those days where I, my last count, I was at 278 emails yesterday,
Oof.
which is about one every 2 minutes. Literally, I wrote that down
I
yesterday.
love
I was
that.
like, it was such a chaotic day. I was like, you know what? I wonder how many emails came through. It was just, you couldn't get to just boom, 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 boom. And they're chaotic. So I
Hmm.
didn't like yesterday.
Right.
But overall, I don't think you'll find a more passionate entrepreneur and, business person than me.
Yes. I've been doing a couple videos here and there of trying to tell people that you don't have to sit in corporate hell. You can do something on your own. There are options. There's anxiety and there's stress, but it's good stress. It's good anxiety. Like you said, you got up at 1:30 a.m. You had these ideas and you couldn't wait to put them down. And I'm going through the similar now, and it's changed my entire life. My attitude, it's changed my health, it's changed my relationship with my kids, literally every aspect. And I I want to tell anybody who would listen, if you're miserable and you don't want that life anymore, there's something you can do about it. How do you feel about that?
Well, I wouldn't oversteer the car initially
Mm,
because
good.
most businesses do fail
Mm,
over a long period of time.
right.
And in my experience, there's not a lot of true, what I would call true entrepreneurs. There are a ton of people that fall into the entrepreneur category that says, I want to be my own boss and I want
Hmm.
to do my own thing, but I'd like a little bit of help because I'm smart enough to know I don't know everything. That's where the
Right.
franchising world
Yeah.
comes in. Why franchising is so popular. I believe a ton of people fall into that category. And then there's a segment of people, my dad being one of them, that had the same job for
Mm,
30 something odd years. There's a segment that lives that way. What I would tell you is to really ask yourself, do you have that fire in you? Because there's a trade-off. Okay, I'm miserable at my job. I don't like coming here every day. I can't imagine working here every day. Okay, well, is there a better job that aligns with your skill set and your passions? Or were you like me? It wasn't that I didn't like the job. It wasn't that I didn't like sales, and it wasn't like that. I didn't like the lack of freedom.
mm.
That was a big difference for me.
Hmm.
So what I traded out the security of a W-2, the security of a W-2
Right.
for that. There's a price for that.
Right. Right.
And that price can be everything from no paycheck to going in debt, leveraging your house, getting involved in lawsuits. There's so many
Hmm.
things, but if you're like me, the price of freedom is worth it.
Yeah.
It's not easy and you're going to be tested.
Yeah.
And you better really understand why you're doing it
Hmm.
before you step into it. Because the first time your number one employee quits, or your number one client quits, or you get sued from an old employee that accuses you that you wrongful terminate,
Right.
what, and it never stops.
Never stops. Doesn't get,
It just keeps going.
it gets
It just keeps going.
larger actually as you grow.
And as you get bigger, and as you get bigger, it just gets bigger. And probably the most amount of legal stuff that we were ever dealing with was when we had internal counsel working for us.
Mm,
And it seemed like it's like, okay,
weird.
are we getting more involved in legal stuff because we have a legal guy now, or is it because
Is he
why is this
soliciting
happening?
business? Like, what is happening? Yeah.
So you the stuff that you don't have to deal with that somebody else in your organization right now is dealing with, you're gonna have to deal with that.
Yeah.
And if you can't handle it, then find something that will drive your passion and be excited about that gives you the comfort of a W-2 and less stress, etc. But if you're willing to trade that out for, you know, more freedom, more opportunity, more potential, the risk reward to me has always been worth it.
I'm very curious. You probably have learned a lot of lessons, as you said, through trial and error. What's the biggest one you made that you caused? You made a mistake and realized quickly or not so quickly, probably shouldn't have done that. Anything come to mind?
Probably the biggest shift, and this encompasses everything. This encompasses personal, business, spiritual.
Mm,
I had a business relationship that was going south, and it had gotten to a point where it was just very antagonistic. Everything he said to me would trigger me. Everything I said to him would trigger him. And this went on for a period. And he thought he was right. I thought I was right. And both parties were just dug in and we couldn't get
yeah.
anywhere. And I was reading a book at the time, Gary Zukov, Seed of the Soul.
Okay.
And there's a chapter in there called Illusion. And it's basically talking about making the conscious choice back to the loop. It actually, if I was in my physical office where I used to be, it'd be right here, I'd show you. But there's a picture of it in his book. And it's talking about, when something happens to you, whether that's anger, fear, whatever it is, if you take the unconscious choice and you react in the same manner, that loop is going to continue. It's kind of that karmic loop, but it's not until you make the conscious choice. And even if you're met with anger or hate or distrust or whatever, and if you meet it with love and compassion, it breaks that cycle.
Wow.
I remember going through this process and I said, "You know what? I'm gonna try this." I got my number one adversary. And so I remember going into it like our next meeting and wasn't combative. I wasn't argumentative. And I was like, "Yep, nope, you're right. Yep, no, absolutely. Yep, yep, yep." And I was very agreeable. And it's still bang, 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 bang,
Right.
bang. And I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work.
Well, he didn't read the
So
book. He wasn't ready for that.
well, what I learned was, as I thought more about it, and I went back, let me just make sure I'm doing this right, da, da,
Yeah.
da, da. And after I got through this, and you keep reading the chapter, it says, once you make the decision that you're ready to get out of that loop, the universe will comply with
Wow.
your desire and will basically force upon you all these attempts to, okay, you say you want to get out of this karmic loop. Here's your chance, and I'm going to put you to the test.
I
And if you
gotcha.
go one paragraph further, it talks about it's not just the act of doing it.
Yeah.
This has to be from your soul.
Yeah. Yeah. Commitment.
Kid you not, the moment I switched that and I went into the next meeting with appreciation that he was pointing these things out and
Oof.
appreciation that this was going this way and appreciated, the investment that he had made down the road and appreciated this out of my
Wow.
life.
One thing comes to mind. If Jim Collins ever wrote another book and talked about level 5, he could talk about that right there because that is the epitome of what makes a level 5 leader. That little spark of humility. That takes a lot of
Yep.
strength. Question.
Yes.
How do you want to be remembered?
I would hope that when I check out, two things. One, I want, if people do a celebration of life type thing for me, I've said this to multiple people. I want you to get up there and I want you to tell everybody the funniest story you can remember about me. Because I'm a huge
Yeah.
prankster. I love to do pranks on people.
Okay.
And I would love for people to remember that. My God, you remember the one time he did this and this and this? My God, all those various pranks. But then the second thing would be people that could remember me for their aha moment.
Mm.
They go, "You know what? I was going through this, and, I went and heard him speak, or I read something that he had posted, or I talked to him one time and he said that one thing, and it was just like, it was what I needed, and it never resonated with me you know, until the way he put it." And that's as I, look to do more speaking in the future,
Mm.
I would want to have people walk out of there not feeling pumped up and motivated, but they got it. There's something they had that light bulb click on for them. That's what I would want. I would want a lot of light bulbs clicked on.
Love that. I think there would be many. Just talking with you for the little bit of time, I have a few myself. So we are going to have a part two, not only because I want to follow up with you on the book, on the speaking, how the franchise is going, but I want to hear about some of these pranks. So that's
Oh,
the most important one that we need to follow up on.
well, remind me because I have some good ones.
Good. Cary, this has been so much fun, enlightening. I've gotten some great things from you. I think our listeners will too. Cary Daniel, CEO and co-founder of NEXTAFF, and we will hope to see you soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
I
so
appreciate it.
much.